The body is the chariot. Know yourself as its rider. The intellect is the charioteer. The mind controls its reins. The senses are the horses, and their objects are the roads. If the mind is uncontrolled and distracted, the senses run wild like vicious horses. If the mind is restrained and the intellect discriminates, the senses will deliver you unto freedom. Kathopanishad, Adhyay 1, Mantras 3-6.
Welcome back to Legends of Vedanta, and today we are opening one of those small, crowded rooms inside the mind, the habit of overthinking. We all know it, the replay button that never stops turning figments of worries and what-ifs into an entire novel. In this episode, we look at how Vedanta sees overthinking as a symptom, and how classical Vedanta points to a cure. And we will try to close with a short guided practice you can use the next time your mind turns into a factory for anxious thoughts. But before we go further, let us turn to a Vedantic parable. It is not a historical record. It's a story designed to land an insight. Once there was a young king who simply could not sleep. His mind was used to chasing endless possibilities, enemies, alliances, the right vocabulary to use, the correct successor. He asked the royal physicians for potions, and they offered herbs. He asked philosophers, and they offered new arguments. Still he lay awake, loop after loop. A wise man came to the court and watched the king for a day. At dusk, the wise man walked into the treasury and returned with a heavy basket full of smooth stones. He told the king to carry that basket everywhere for a week and to set it down only at night. The king was annoyed, but he was still curious, and therefore he obliged. At first, the load made him clumsy and impatient. He became furious that his hands were full and his mind still fuller of worry. After a few days, the king noticed something odd. When his hands were bearing the weight, the rest of his body relaxed. He no longer worried about small household tasks. He couldn't because his hands were occupied. He noticed that when he set the basket down, all the thoughts returned swiftly as if they had been freed once again. On the final day, the wise man said, "Now, walk with the basket one last time. When you set it down, instead of picking up the old habits of thought, just notice the sensation of your hands emptying. See how the mind reaches for a burden only when the body is free to hold it." The king realized the lesson. The stones were a stand-in for the habit of carrying thought. Overthinking had become his default posture, something he would do when his hands and attention were unoccupied. The wise man then taught the king a second practice. When thoughts arrive, name them briefly and choose to carry a different, light object of service, a small chore, a breath, a counting, until the compulsion to spin your thoughts subsides. The parable's message is literal and practical. Overthinking thrives in misdirected attention. Give the hands and mind something skillful to do. don't feed the loop of overthinking. Now then, what is overthinking? When thought, instead of becoming a useful tool to solve a problem, becomes repetitive, worry-laden, scattered, and self-referential. We chew on the same idea over and over again. We try to find certainty where there isn't any. Thoughts loop, we clench, our sleep suffers, creativity languishes, and decision-making becomes harder. Psychologists call this rumination or worry. Vedanta uses different vocabulary but describes the same map. The mind or the manas, its impressions or samskaras or vasanas, and the ego-making faculty, ahamkara, run habitual patterns. The trouble is not with thinking itself. Thinking is necessary. But being fused to thought and mistaking it for the whole of who we are harms us. Vedanta begins from one central insight. The self, Atman, is not the same as the mind, body, or personality. When we forget the distinction, a chain reaction begins. We suffer from avidya or ignorance, or the misidentification of the self with the non-self. Then there is ahamkara, the I maker, the faculty that claims ownership. I did this. I am that. This stems from vasanas or samskaras, which are subtle tendencies and impressions that shape recurring thought patterns. And in the process, we lose the Sakshi, the witness consciousness, the silent observer that Vedanta calls our true nature. Overthinking occurs when the ahamkara and the vasanas get activated and the mind mistakes those for reality. We think a hostile email means we are worthless. We replay a bad conversation and then create a future based on that replay. Vedanta says the stream of thoughts is not the seer. It is merely content appearing in consciousness. The problem is misidentification. We are the seer, but we take ourselves to be the seen. A useful metaphor from Vedanta is that of a pair of birds sitting on the same tree. One bird tastes fruit and is caught up in pleasure and pain. The other watches in silence. Vedanta's work is to help us realize that we are the witness bird, not the fruit-eating one. So, the ailment is misidentification, and its symptom is overthinking. Now then, there's also a modern story, well known in Vedantic circles, that guards like a watchtower in the dark seas of overthinking. The story revolves around Ramana Maharshi. When Ramana Maharshi was a teenager, he had a sudden, intense fear of death. The fear wasn't a little shiver. It was a full-body existential panic. Instead of turning to distractions, he asked a single, incandescent question. Who am I? He then took that question not as a riddle, but as a laser. Where does this feeling of I stand? He pursued that I through layers of body, sensation, thought, and memories. As he kept asking and tracing, the sense of a separate self dissolved into pure, unmoving awareness. The panic transformed into unshakable stillness. What matters about this story for our episode is not whether you become a saint overnight, like Ramana Maharshi. The takeaway is its method. When mental loops escalate into fear or obsessive thought, A single pointed inquiry, who is the thinker, can short circuit the story of the overthinking mind. It shifts attention from the content to the source of the content. If you are thinking, well, I could never do that, remember that the practice is small and can be done in everyday bursts. You don't have to sit silently for hours. The priceless thing is the habit of redirecting attention. Ramana's method was direct and minimalist. It comprised persistent, honest self-inquiry. The claustrophobia of panic collapsed into a spacious, unmoving awareness. He left home, settled at Arunachala, and his life thereafter became a living demonstration. The habit of identifying with thought had been broken at its roots. Ramana did not argue with his thoughts. He changed the reference point. Overthinking relies on the conviction that the thinker is the whole of who we are. Self-inquiry reveals that the thinker is merely the content within a larger field of awareness. And once you taste that difference, thought loses its absolute authority. Now, let us perform a short practice to apply the teachings of these stories. You can use this anytime your mind becomes too busy with overthinking. I will count the pauses so you can breathe along as you listen to me guide you to a restful state of mind. Sit comfortably. Soften your shoulders. Allow your eyes to close if that's safe for you. Take one natural breath in and out. Now, bring attention to the breath at the nostrils for 2 breaths. In out. In out. Allow your attention to broaden now. Notice the field of experience, sounds, sensations, thoughts. Don't hold anything, just notice. If a thought arises, label it gently. If an emotion arises, name it. Is it worry? Is it sadness? Are you planning something? Say it silently, without judgment. Now ask once quietly, who is aware of this thought? Do not hunt for an intellectual answer. Just switch your attention to the sense of the eye that notices. Where is that eye located? Is it in the chest, the mind, the throat, or is it simply awareness itself? Now finish by bringing attention back to your breath. Take one grounding inhalation, and as you exhale, gently open your eyes. That was 3 minutes of practice, enough to create a tiny gap between you and your thoughts. Returning to that gap is the real work of Vedanta. Before we close, these are a few practical tips that can blend Vedanta with your everyday life. First, limit the feed. Overthinking feeds on information. Set specific times for checking email or news. Reduce instant replay of the mind. 2. Journaling for 5 minutes. Get the worst loops out of your head onto paper. Then read them and label the emotions. That tends to disempower ruminations. 3. Use time-boxed thinking. Give yourself 10 minutes to plan and then stop. Discipline trains the mind. 4. Community and talk therapy. Vedanta complements, not replaces, modern therapies. If worry becomes crippling, please seek professional help. Vedanta offers tools, but mental health care is real help when needed, and it will require professional guidance. 5. Practice consistency. A 5-minute daily witness practice is better than 1 heroic hour a month. Overthinking is not a moral failing, it's a conditioned habit. Vedanta names the habit, it offers a diagnosis, and offers you practical methods. Discernment, detachment, and steady practice, and a strikingly simple pointer, that is to remember that you are the witness. The Mundaka Upanishad says that the seeker must go from the known to the unknown, from the gross to the subtle, or, to put it in our terms, from the noisy content to the quiet source. That movement is what turns thought from a prison into a friend. If this episode landed for you, try the 3-minute witness practice tomorrow when your mind starts replaying something. And notice the difference and tell us how you felt afterwards. Thank you for listening to Legends of Vedanta. If you like this episode, please subscribe and share it with a friend who overthinks. Well, we all know at least one of them. Next week, we will explore another Vedantic legend, hopefully taking a deeper look at attachment and freedom. Until then, may your thinking be useful, and may you remember who is the Sakshi behind it all.